on January 24th, 1891, in the quiet German town of Genthin, in a respected family of a Lutheran teacher whose roots went deep into the centuries to an ancient aristocratic lineage, a significant event occurred. A boy was born. At that moment, nothing foreshadowed that this child would become a famous and controversial military leader in the future, whose name would be inscribed in history. From his very birth, the boy was distinguished by rather poor health and fragile physique, which set him apart from other children. Unlike his peers who gladly spent time in active games outdoors, the son of the seminary teacher found more pleasure in the silence and solitude of his room. It was there, in a quiet and peaceful setting, that he could immerse himself completely in his favorite pastime, reading various books, which undoubtedly developed his mind and imagination. This boy was named Otto Moritz Walter Model. In the summer of 1904, an event occurred that fundamentally influenced his future and completely changed his life path. The young man, quite by chance, witnessed a fragment of the Kaiser's army's maneuvers. This spectacle so impressed his young soul that he literally became inflamed with the dream of a military career. From that very moment, he could no longer imagine himself outside the army. His heart and mind were completely devoted to military service, which became his purpose in life. Just 2 years later, in 1906, he successfully entered and became a cadet at the military school in Nyssa. There, harsh days awaited him, filled with endless drills, severe punishments from instructors who did not hesitate to use physical force, as well as humiliating evening bullying by senior cadets. All these deprivations and hardships were considered commonplace and necessary to form a Nordic, strong character and to cultivate unconditional obedience in the future officer, ready to carry out any order. Model went through World War I from beginning to end, repeatedly ending up in hospitals for treatment of injuries sustained, which testified to his participation in the most fierce battles. For his demonstrated bravery, courage, and military valor, he was awarded the Iron Cross First Class, a very honorable award, and by the end of the war, he was promoted to captain, which spoke of his professional growth. After the capitulation of Germany, the German army underwent a significant reduction, which was related to the terms of the peace treaty. Many experienced and deserving combat officers were out of work and forced to find their place in civilian life, as they could no longer continue their military careers. However, Model was, so to speak, lucky, or rather, he showed perseverance and determination. He managed to remain in service and was appointed to the General Staff, where he continued his military career, improving his knowledge and skills. In 1933, the National Socialists came to power in Germany, which led to serious changes in the political and military life of the country. Lieutenant Colonel Model, who by that time already had vast and varied military experience, advanced quite quickly up the career ladder, eventually receiving a high general rank, which testified to his recognition as a talented military leader. He was appointed Chief of Staff of a corps that participated in the Polish campaign. Then he became Chief of Staff of an army that marched through France with triumph and lightning speed, achieving a series of impressive victories, which confirmed his high professional level. However, the first serious and resounding defeat he, Otto Moritz Walter Model, suffered in 1941 near Moscow from the Soviet troops, which came as an unexpected and unpleasant surprise to him. Prior to this, his tank division, which was part of Guderian's 2nd Panzer Group, distinguished itself in the border battles, inflicting serious damage on the enemy, and then actively participated in the encirclement of units of the Red Army near Kiev. After the crushing defeat near Moscow, the Führer removed many high-ranking military commanders from their positions who, in his opinion, had not coped with the task. However, Model, who at that time held the position of General of Tank Troops, was instead promoted to commander of an army, which testified to his high trust in this military leader. He took command of the 9th Army, which was considered one of the most powerful and combat-ready armies of the Wehrmacht, and on which great hopes were placed. In fairness, It should be noted that Model was one of the few generals who allowed himself, from time to time, to ignore the Führer's direct instructions and act based on his own vision of the specific situation and his rich military experience, which sometimes led to success and sometimes to serious problems. In January 1942, the Ninth Army, under Model's skillful command, secured a position on the Führer'S salient. It is necessary to give credit to the German military leader. He very competently and skillfully built up the defense, using all the features of the terrain, and his soldiers held on with exceptional persistence and resilience, repelling all enemy attacks. The Soviet troops could not advance for more than a year, despite all their efforts and significant losses, which amounted to about 1 million killed, wounded, and captured, which spoke to the high effectiveness of the German defense. It is precisely this rather contradictory episode of the war that some historians use to praise the military genius of the German general, contrasting him with Soviet military leaders, who, in their opinion, were only capable of overwhelming the enemy with human resources without regard for losses. However, not everything is as clear-cut as it might seem at first glance. Model, it must be acknowledged, really built his defense very skillfully, taking into account all the features of the terrain, which allowed him to effectively contain the advancing enemy, while using limited resources and inflicting heavy losses on him. In addition, this salient was extremely necessary for the Germans for a possible second attempt to advance on Moscow. Therefore, the withdrawal of troops from these strategically important positions was out of the question. Only the crushing and humiliating defeat of Paulus's army at Stalingrad forced the German command to give the order to withdraw its group from the Führer'S salient in order to avoid a repeat of the catastrophe. Otherwise, Model could very likely have repeated the sad fate of Paulus and his army. The Wehrmacht is actively and extensively preparing for the decisive Battle of Kursk, on which the further course of the war largely depended. According to the plans of the High Command, Model's Ninth Army was assigned a key role in this battle, and great hopes and responsibilities were placed on it. However, something went wrong, and the entire operation failed. The army could not advance, and was pushed back by the Central Front under the command of the talented and experienced Konstantin Rokossovsky. Then followed a forced and difficult retreat to Bryansk to the defensive line Hagen. After that, Model received from his subordinates the ironic and not entirely flattering nickname Master of Retreat, which, however, reflected the real state of affairs. From February 1944, Walter Model becomes something like the fireman of the Führer. He is transferred to the most dangerous and critical sectors of the front, where he replaces Field Marshal von Kuckler as commander of Army Group North, once again confirming his dubious title of Master of Retreat. At the beginning of March, he skillfully and organizedly withdrew troops from Leningrad, managing to save the units entrusted to him from imminent encirclement, which testified to his tactical mastery. Already in the high rank of Field Marshal, Model is appointed commander of Army Group North Ukraine, where he replaced Erich von Manstein, who was removed from command, which spoke to the seriousness of the crisis in the German army. In July, he also takes command of Army Group Center, making him one of the most influential military leaders in the German army. Model, making incredible efforts and using all his military experience, tried to contain the powerful Soviet offensive, which was becoming more and more inevitable. But unfortunately, all his attempts were futile and ineffective. His armies only stopped retreating when the Red Army stopped for another regrouping, replenishment of supplies, and rest, which gave the Germans a temporary respite. At the end of the summer of 1944, the Fireman of the Führer was already on the Western Front, where the situation for Germany was also extremely difficult. Hitler entrusted him with containing the offensive of the British and Americans, who were gradually approaching the borders of Germany. Model, at the cost of incredible efforts, self-sacrifice, and using all his experience, managed to gather the remnants of the troops defeated in Normandy and create a semblance of a front, which, undoubtedly slowed the advance of the Allies. It was thanks to his actions that the Allies lost their confidence in an easy and quick walk on the way to Berlin. However, already in December in the Ardennes, where the German troops managed to force the Allies to temporarily retreat, which became the last success of the German army, he failed to repeat the brilliant maneuver of von Kleist from the time of the French campaign of 1940, which brought the German troops such a quick and confident victory. After a powerful tank attack by troops under the command of General Patton, the Germans were finally pushed back to the east, suffering huge and irreparable losses without achieving their goals, which predetermined their further defeat. And then there was only a steady and constant retreat, which testified to the complete collapse of the German army. In April 1945, Model's group found itself in an extremely difficult and hopeless situation, squeezed between the Ruhr and Sieg rivers, which actually meant a complete encirclement. The German forces were rapidly dwindling. Ammunition and fuel were running out, which made further resistance pointless. The commander, realizing the hopelessness of the situation, gave his soldiers the right to make their own decision, to fight to the end and die or surrender, which was a very unusual decision. Most of the remnants of the German troops preferred the second option and surrendered. Understanding that further resistance was pointless, Allied troops captured more than 300,000 people, including 24 generals, which spoke to the complete defeat of the German army in this sector of the front. But what about Model? Field Marshal Walter Model, finding himself in a hopeless situation, preferred the third option of events, not wanting to surrender. On April 21st, 1945, a single shot rang out in a forest near the village of Widow, which ended the life of the famous German military leader. The field marshal, true to his oath, did not forget the Führer's words that a German field marshal never surrenders.